Hi everyone, welcome back again. Namaste. This is Kunal Bothra, and today yet again we join for fresh Facebook Live. Yesterday I know that there was some issue with the Facebook Live, but we try to ensure that hopefully going forward we may not have such kind of issues, and we keep on improving and improvising ourselves. Today, the discussion which we are going to have is very interesting, and it's on one of the key technical parameters which we all know has a significant impact on the index, but the understanding of that particular observation could be considered in a very different or a vague manner. So the topic which we are taking today is death crossover. Now, I'll share the charts with you of what exactly do we mean by death crossover. Death crossover in very simple technical terms. As you can see on the chart, I am assuming that today you can see the charts and the screen is properly visible to all of you guys. So the idea with death crossover is the 50 DMA crossing below the 200-day moving average. So what does this mean? This typically means that the short-term moving average, that's the 50 DMA, falls below the 200 DMA. That indicates that the short-term trend has become bearish for the index. Now the term death crossover. So death एक ऐसा word है जो when you put this into parlance of technical analysis, the understanding could be extremely negative. एक negative feeling आती है when you hear the word death crossover. But the idea of putting this word as death crossover is it's the death or an end of a particular trend. In this case, it's an end of a bullish trend and a shift towards a bearish sentiment. Now, today's discussion, which we are going to have, is just over the next few minutes. We'll see how death crossovers can impact the trend for the index. And historically, how many times have we seen death crossovers? And whenever you've seen death crossovers, what has been the impact on the index going forward, and how significant has been the impact for the index? Now you would be amazed to see the kind of observations which you'll be putting across for death crossovers. So let's hope and pray that we don't see a major impact on the negative side, and the bearish sentiment which has been going on for the last 4 or 5 months, that could probably take a back seat, and you might see some bit of reprieve or revival. But then the discussion today is just on the basis of what this death crossover is. So as I said, the 50 DMA, in this case, this blue line which you can see is the 50 DMA. The red line which you can see is the 200-day moving average. Uh, what I've done is just put a point across so that you can see that when did we see the death crossover historically. So we go back to the previous time when the death crossover was visible for the index. So this is the time when the death crossover happened. This was in April 2023. Again, a time period where previously from 19,000 Nifty, we fell to almost 17,000, which means यहाँ पे भी we had a 10% correction. The Nifty fell below 200 DMA. We had a 10% correction. There was a death crossover. Death crossover, which means that so if I zoom this, yep, now I think you can see it maybe very clearly. So this death crossover means the 50 DMA crosses below the 200-day moving average. But in this case, this did not convert to be a big trend on the downside. In fact, death crossover proved to be a false signal. And what happened post that? Post that, we actually saw the index moving up higher. Okay, now we go back to say 2020. So 2020 is a brilliant case. COVID sell-off, an aggressive sell-off. Now, when the death crossover happened, so this is the point of death crossover, the Nifty was already at 8,500 levels. Now we've already fallen by 4,000 points. उसके बाद death crossover का signal आया. That leads to a remainder sell-off. So last 1,000 points का sell-off एक extreme stretch में हो गया. but उसके बाद में it starts to go into a repair work. So death crossover historically has not necessarily means that the index is going through a major sharp downtrend. बहुत बार ऐसा हुआ है कि death crossover आने से पहले major pain is actually out of the system. The major pain ends into the system. So let's look at another example. See this. 2020 के पहले 2019. So over here also the Nifty fell from 12,100. It came down to 10,700 thereabouts. So which means a 10% correction already happened. Death crossover happens on this day, on this candle. The Nifty falls in the next 3, 4, 5 days. But post that, you see a big revival candle. So typically, death crossover does not necessarily mean that the bullish trend is ending and the bearish trend could be very fierce. Let's look at few exceptions to this. Like for example, in 2008. So yeah, 2008. Okay, this is 2008. Now this was a time when the death crossover happened, as you can see. But in after every death crossover, if you've seen that there is one tendency of Nifty, एक tendency क्या है? वो एक बार आता है और एक रेड लाइन जो है ना, ये आपका 200 DM है, उसको रीटेस्ट करने का ट्राई जरूर करता है. So after every death crossover, even in a bearish market, in a major bear market like in 2008, a major bear market, even in that point of time, there is one attempt by the index to try and come closer to the 200-day moving average, which is the red line. Okay, and that establishes whether index is sustaining or whether it doesn't sustain about this 200 DMA. And if it doesn't sustain, then the index goes into a second round of correction. Let's look at over here. One more example, 2014-15 correction. यहाँ पे वापस डेथ क्रॉसओवर हुआ. इंडेक्स प्री द डेथ क्रॉसओवर वेंट इनटू 10% करेक्शन. डेथ क्रॉसओवर आने के बाद में एक रैली आई, 200 डे मूविंग एवरेज का रीटेस्ट हुआ. द डेथ क्रॉसओवर फेल्ड, rather the bounce back failed, index could not sustain, and then you saw continuation sell off which happened subsequently in the next 5-6 months for the Nifty. Now this is where we are today. Why is this significant and important? Now we are at a juncture where Nifty at 23,200 mota mota has given a death crossover. Correct? I hope you agree with me over here. Okay, we've seen a death crossover, which means the Nifty is fallen down. Maybe, I'm saying just maybe, you might see maybe another few more days of correction. But the real test of a death crossover happens once the index retests and tries to come back to this 200-day moving average line, which means that there is a very strong likelihood that closer to the month of February or the budget, there could be a chance that the index may bounce back and try and come back to that 200 DMA line, which is 24,000. But अगर ये 24,000 sustain नहीं होता है, तब जाके second round of correction आता है. Now, what gives me another data point to try and supplement this fact? Look at the sector. Now, this is the auto sector. Okay. Now, you already know that auto stocks and auto sector has fallen by 5-10% and more. यहाँ पे auto sector में death crossover आया, 3-4 days का residual correction, but then a retest towards the 200 DMA. Correct? I hope you are now getting the hang, getting the point that even after death crossover, there is a few days of further correction, but a first retest of 200 DMA establishes whether the trend is strong or weak. अब ये रीडिंग देख के आपको क्या लग रहा है कि ऑटो इंडेक्स has confirmed a bearish death or rather death crossover. It tried to come back towards its 200 moving average, failed to sustain, which means यहाँ पे trend अभी भी थोड़ा weak है. Right? Let's look at another sector like the FMCG. Okay, again many of the FMCG stocks have fallen. Same हुआ यहाँ पे death crossover, but again look at post the death crossover. Eventually, very slowly, steadily, it tried to come back towards its 200 DMA, failed to really cross over about its 200 DMA, एंड उसके बाद में एडिशनल प्रेशर आया. So now if we add the data point, so if you can imagine and extrapolate, what could happen is that eventually, say in the next 5 days, 10 days approximately, we should try and come closer to 23,800 mark, maybe this 24,000 mark. I'm assuming the 200 DMA, this red line, will stay flat at 24,000 levels. But वहां पे फर्स्ट लिटमस टेस्ट होगा इस डेथ क्रॉसओवर का. If we are unable to surpass about those levels, then I believe that additional selling can happen and the second round of the index selling can take the index further down. So I hope you found this very, very interesting. The death crossover, the name signifies bearishness, but historically we've seen that death crossover doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be very vicious or very sharp selling. It generally means that हो सकता है post death crossover you might see a relief rally which comes by, the relief rally trying to retest the 200-day moving average for the index, and if the 200 moving average sustains then index हो सकता है वापस से न्यू तेजी में आए. बट अगर वो नहीं सस्टेन होता है तब जाके एक सेकेंड राउंड ऑफ करेक्शन आता है. So I hope you found this very, very interesting. Don't forget to stay tuned to the channel because we'll come out with new interesting topics on a regular basis. We'll come out with new ideas, we'll come out with new thoughts, and we'll try and look at this on a live chart basis. So don't forget to like, share, and don't forget to comment. What we'll do eventually, say over the next few days, we'll start taking your queries also. So eventually, going forward, we'll start taking your queries, your stock specific queries, your thoughts on the market, and then we'll try and see that whether your thoughts on the markets align with what the charts are telling at that point of time. Okay. Thank you so much. See you guys again tomorrow for the next YouTube live. Bye bye.